And oftentimes clients will say to me, hey, this guy's written a book. And look, in his book, it gives information of how to contact him. Why don't you reach out to him? Why don't you hire this guy? I always say to them, let me go through a speaker's bureau. Let me go through Seth. Let me go through my normal channels, because God forbid, if I hire that guy and something happens at the last minute and he has to back out, he doesn't replace himself. If I use you and God forbid at the last minute they cancel, you say, I'm on it, Glenna. I've got somebody lined up. Let me make a couple phone calls. Don't worry, I'm all over this.
Hello and welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator. Our guest is Glenna Fulks. Glenna is the president, founder, and chief connection officer at Kite Meetings. This is a really important conversation for meeting professionals. We cover topics like corporate social responsibility, sustainable conferences. We take a deep dive into creating a memorable event experience for attendees, and many other topics like budget, optimizing strategy and messaging. It's a fascinating conversation. We appreciate you joining us. Tune in, you're going to be smarter for it. Hello and welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman. I'm your host and the founder of the Keynote Curators. And quite frankly, I am your Keynote Curator. Today's guest is Glenna Fulks. Glenna and I have known each other and worked together, I would say at least 10 years, if not longer. And it's just great to have you as a guest on our podcast, Glenna.
Hi there.
Hi there. Welcome to the Keynote Curators podcast. You know, before we get into some of our questions and our conversation going, could you just share with our listeners who are meeting professionals, event planners, conference planners, a little bit about what brought you to this moment today, where you are in your career, what's happening with you that's important for us to know?
Well, my career has spanned a few years, more than a few, in fact, but I was really fortunate. At some point in my life, I was in the right place at the right time, and I had an opportunity to work for what was then Coopers & Lybrand, one of the big 8 accounting firms. I thought it sounded exciting and interesting, and I ended up in Europe for a while. Coopers & Lybrand was based in London. Eventually, they merged with Pricewaterhouse. And I was doing a lot of business development meetings for the both accounting and consulting services in the telecommunications industry. So the people who were attending the business development meetings that I was planning were the CEOs and the directors and senior level executives of every major telecommunication company in the world. And it was, frankly, it was amazing to be on the cusp of what was happening in telecom 12, 15 years ago. What we have today, they knew about back then. I remember hearing and seeing prototypes. I remember hearing panels discuss where phones would eventually be. They were tossing the word smartphone around 15 years ago, maybe not realizing exactly what it was going to look and feel like, but they knew it existed. And it was quite revolutionary to hear all about that and to plan those meetings and to work with the speakers in all of the amazing locations. Those meetings all took place in European capitals. And I will say this, planning a meeting in Europe is a different service landscape than working in the US. That doesn't take anything away from the service and the experience of many US venues. It was just a different service landscape, and it seemed like everything had a higher touch point to it. Eventually, I decided that I wanted to move on and continue to expand and broaden my career. So I came back to the US, where I worked in the pharmaceutical and the biotech medical device industry, which was a whole different set of planning challenges. Instead of having 9 months to prepare an event that was extraordinary and where every day, every moment was a wow factor, now we had 9 weeks. You put together national sales conferences. Sometimes you put together product launches in months, not, half of a year or a whole year. you were still planning, you were moving more on the fly than you were very slowly, and you were using and creating, and you were forced to think outside the box quicker and faster, but you were still using the same skills that you had learned, or that I had adapted while I was working in Europe, just more of it and faster and with less time to think about it. So eventually, after many opportunities and a few different corporate experiences, my mother called one day and asked if I could come home. And I said, "Well, sure, Mom, but why do you want me to come home?" And her response was, in that typical way only my mother can do. She told me
Mhm.
she couldn't remember what day it was. And
Mm.
I was stunned. We were talking about an 86-year-old woman who had taught high school business for 35 years. She had never been at a loss for anything. And suddenly she didn't know what day of the week it was. So I was working at a company in Philadelphia where I was working a lot with promotional products companies, the companies that produce the kind of gifts and giveaways that make every meeting standard, whether it's a pen or a mug or a hat, whatever. Those are promotional companies. I was working a lot with those companies and producing trade shows. And so I took the necessary steps, did what was needed. And so I moved back to my small hometown in Ohio 5 years ago. I launched a meeting planning company, which was initially successful. It is still growing and thriving. I may be one of the few people who can say that I figured out how to pivot and continue to grow and develop and thrive and make a business thrive during COVID. And while business did slow down, I decided now's the time. I had always wanted to go back to school and pursue a master's degree. The University of Southern California was offering an amazing program. It was a Master's of Science in Hospitality and Tourism Management. I applied, I was accepted, and I went back to grad school. And last August, I completed my capstone thesis, and I now hold a master's from the University of Southern California. And I have to say, I turned my thesis in that morning. It was one morning in August. And that afternoon, I had a conference call with a new client, and it's been nonstop, fast paced, more than I could have ever imagined. Everything that you hear about, well, when you get your degree, when you get back into it, when meetings go live again, it all happened. It was a immediate reaction. And I've been running to keep up ever since. And here I am.
Quite a trajectory from the beginning overseas till, moving out of Philadelphia, coming back home, and, the graduate degree. Congratulations. I followed your
Thank you.
journey on social media. It was extraordinary. I know for you, quite a proud moment. It was very cool to, on the outskirts, just watching it and be included in the progress, and just what an accomplishment. In this trajectory, Glenna, you've had such a breadth of experience. You can create the event with months of anticipation and then reduce down to weeks. And that, as you said, it's the same skill set, but there's just different constraints, different resources, and it requires you to be more agile. And as you said, think outside the box. And there's so much involved, from more of the logistical, dare I say, mundane stuff about the registration processes, which are important, the food and beverage, the agenda, the event strategy, the event marketing. What is your favorite hat to wear in all of that?
Oh, it's creating the experience. And
Yeah, I think I
you
was
can
going to guess that about you.
Yeah, you can create an experience on the fly, or you can create one if you have 6 or 7 months to plan. When I say create an experience, I had a client one time who said, we were meeting in Venice, and he said, "I want to take my guests, the people that would be seated at his table. I want to take my guests to our dinner venue by gondola." Okay. We did that. He came back the next year, and he was the host of the event. And he's like, "I want to hold our black tie dinner in the Palace of Versailles, in the Hall of Mirrors." And this experience factor, the wow factor, it got bigger every time I worked with this particular partner. It is not possible, by the way. I'll just put it out there. It's really not possible to do an event in the Hall of Mirrors. There's only a couple of people in the world that have access to the Palace of Versailles, to the Hall of Mirrors. However, it just so happens that the palace is one of those buildings that east side of the building mimics the west side of the building. Every room on the east side is mirrored on the west side. And so they have a hall of portraits. And so we did the dinner, the black tie dinner in the hall of portraits. It was amazing. We left.
Magical.
It was magical. I mean, imagine, if you can, being served each course of the meal by people who were dressed in 17th century livery costumes. And when the meal was over, we got up and we moved over to the chapel, which had been especially built for the christening of one of the Louis, the 16th or 17th. And we went in, sat down, and we had what is referred to as a parlor presentation of the play Les Miserables, not the full-blown production, but the highlights. And when we exited the back of the chapel, that's where the buses were waiting, and the fountains had been turned on, and with a little bit of pre-planning, the water was the corporate colors of the company that, had hosted the event.
Sure.
So everybody rode back. They got on the shuttles, they rode back to Paris, and it was like, how did you do that? And then the question, what are you going to do next year?
Right.
So, yeah.
That's always, in the back of the mind and then to the front of the mind. As the event begins to end, you begin to debrief and think about the next year and, how do you top it, especially something like that. Glenna, I know, working with you and working with meeting planners, how much they relish the moment, creating a unique, tailored, dare I say, curated experience for the event attendees. And that could be ranging from a unique meal, a unique cocktail hour, a unique venue, a special type of moment on the agenda, whether it's an opening, a musical opening, or some type of finish that has everything complete with a huge bang, or really stick in people's minds about, wow, that's something I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. So as a meeting planner, that's something that cannot be replaced, that experience and that uniqueness and that creativity that you bring to the event. Glenna, that event that you shared with us that happened at Versailles, which is incredible, the colored water in the fountains and the salon version or the parlor version of Les Mis, just spectacular, unique, breathtaking, and magical. That was pre-pandemic. Now we have the pandemic. How has your experience creation transformed, taking into consideration the post-pandemic world of events?
We're moving. Let's put it that way. We are getting
Okay.
we're moving back to what we used to know and consider normal. But the first several months, 9 months at least, it was safety. Am I safe?
Right.
Have you taken every precaution necessary? Am I secure? And what we did in order to plan for that, we had dispensers in every single room where people could stop and get, cleaning solution. And we had packages, pre-packaged hand wipes that we gave people. The experience of what went in a goodie bag was something that, was a little surreal. We went from having all types of different branded materials, that people wanted, and whether that be, you can't even begin to imagine how all of this developed. You went from cleaners for your glasses and your iPhone to hand wipes.
Right.
People didn't care how dirty their glasses were anymore, or how dirty their iPod screen was anymore. All they wanted was the hand wipes to make sure that, they were sterile. You went from giving people hats to giving people masks. You moved away from water bottles to one-time use bottles of water, so
That's
that they
right.
could use sips and throw it away. There was a technology that was developed called RFID, and it was a response system that you could put on name badges or bracelets, and it would track people so that God forbid, somebody went home and came down with COVID symptoms, they could come back to you. You could take and download their RFID card, which was customized only to them. You could take that card, you could download the information on the card and see and track everybody that they had been within 3 feet of, which allowed you to then begin to try to identify who's the carrier, who's the person that made everybody sick. Or if you couldn't exactly do that, you could at least figure out how many other people were affected. And
Right.
that type of technology, that's an example of technology that was out there. It was in the planning. It was even available pre-pandemic, but nobody ever thought to use it until the pandemic struck. And then, okay, we have got to get back to having live meetings again. We can't sit here on Zoom or Hub or Cvent or any of these other great platforms. We can't do this because we have multi-million-dollar venues out there that are sitting empty. So we had to come up with a plan of how to get back to having live meetings, but it had to be done safely and securely.
And the ability to adapt and to pivot and to make the adjustments that quickly, because it was overnight. We were all in this together. We all have our moment where we had events that canceled, needed to be adjusted on a date, or we're quickly going to some type of platform to be organized and presented, the whole curriculum, the whole agenda, all of the messaging, all the keynotes. And it just speaks to the toolbox and the ability of meeting planners who are faced with something like a pandemic, which is a worldwide impact, and the ability to transform and be agile in the moment and shift an entire in-person event to a platform online and do it virtually. All the messaging, all of the initiatives, all the communications, the registration, making sure the links are live. It just speaks to the resourcefulness of meeting professionals.
More
Glenna,
than you
I want go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I started to say more than you can probably imagine. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many. I
So
mean, I
many
even
movements.
say it in in-person events. There's so much, Glenna, that is visible that we appreciate, but often there's so much that's unseen, that's hidden, that makes what's seen possible. And that's the kind of the magic that goes on behind the scenes that the attendees, they have no reason to even know that it's going on, because they're there to have that experience that is being created by the meeting professional. But I want to shift gears a little bit. There's the big data revolution. It's in full swing. I know you talk about RFID and the impact that it's had and that it's always been there, but it really came into play during the pandemic. Where do you see artificial intelligence or augmented reality being implemented into meetings?
One of the things that we're going to see, and I let me take a step back, as live meetings become a reality again, more live meetings, more face to face, the meetings are going to be smaller. And here's why: because we have figured out that not every single person needs to get on a plane and needs to travel and needs to be in the hotel. There are many people that attend meetings that really need to be there one day. It's a 3 or 4 day meeting. They need to be there one day. So for those people who don't need to be there, don't need the networking, don't need the face-to-face time, they're there to hear and experience or to listen to one presenter. We now have the ability for that person to stay home, to save the corporate dollars. They don't have to travel. They don't have to be in the hotel. They don't have to consume the food and beverage, but they still need to be a part of that one speaker presentation. So they log on, they're a part of the presentation. It comes Q&A time. That platform that they're on allows them to ask their questions just like they were sitting in the audience. They get their answers to their questions. They have participated. Meanwhile, the people that are sitting in the audience, they want to ask questions, but they want to ask in real time. And we are going to be finding that as live meetings, make that rejuvenation and come back, the audience wants to be more active. They don't want to sit there and just listen. They want to be active participants in real time. So using a meeting app that we have developed that links into the registration, the overall registration website, they now, take out their phone, they take out their iPad, they ask a question in live time. That question goes through the audio visual booth and either appears on the screen for the entire audience to see, or it appears on the confidence monitor that the presenter looks down and sees. The presenter answers that question in live time. Maybe the presenter says, "Let me ask you a question," throws it out to the audience and wants the audience to, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is most important, what is least important. So the speaker asks a question and creates a survey opportunity right then and there. The audience responds, and immediately, through the magic of technology, we have a bar chart or a graph that appears on that screen showing the audience how everybody else in the audience reacted to that question.
Including those who are physically not in attendance.
Correct. Everybody gets a seat at the table, whether you're physically seated at the table or not. I have started working with a company who tells me that it is possible to create artificial intelligence for the registration website. So we have created the link. We have the meeting, we have the venue, we have the speakers. We have now put the registration link out there to potential registrants. And they click that link and they hear a voice because that link has been customized. We know when Seth clicks the link. So the voice says, "Hello, Seth, are you ready to register?" And then that voice walks you through your registration program. It helps you determine what breakouts you want to go to. It helps you determine if you need to let us know about special food and beverage options or allergies or things like that. All of that information is captured and it's downloaded. And here's a game changer. It used to be, there was a day and a time when, as a meeting planner, I would have been told, don't share the registration list. Because, you were always afraid there were people that wanted to see who was on the list to determine if they wanted to come or they didn't want to come. Now we're using, okay, who's registered? So when you register, the minute your registration confirmation is complete, you have the option to see who else is registered. And we're going to use that registration information to keep you enthused and interested and excited because of who else is going to be there. You are able right then and there to see who else is also coming. You send a message. "Hey, I see you're registered for the meeting. Do you want to have coffee? Can we meet? Do you want to play golf? Can I meet you for breakfast?" So even before the attendees arrive and pick up that name badge, which probably has an RFID link on it so that we can track everybody, even before that happens, you're already engaged with other people. And the more engaged you are, the more involved you're going to be, the higher your survey results are going to be, the better the evaluations are going to be, the greater the ROI information I have to download and start planning the next meeting.
Right. The stronger the connection between the community of attendees is, again, whether in person, hybrid, or virtually, is always emblematic of the level of engagement and thus your scoring or your reviews or your evaluations. It's just a great introduction and understanding of artificial intelligence and even augmented reality and leveraging, because look, we're going to begin to be seeing, as artificial intelligence, chat GPT 4.0, as all these technologies become used across all industries, specifically as meeting professionals and event planners and conference planners, it's a tool. It's not the end. And as meeting professionals utilize artificial intelligence to enhance the experience, which is what they're all about, and provide a richer, more engaged experience for their attendees, where they're getting education, networking opportunities, and a sense of community for their experience at the event, that's going to be the future use of these technologies. It's not the end all be all. It's just another tool along the way.
Very true. Alrighty. And let me tell you, pre-pandemic, we knew about these tools. We had no idea what we were going to do with them or how we were slowly going to start feeding them into the experiences. And what we assumed was it would all be audio visual, that you would sit in the audience and you would use these tools to create a different audio visual communications kind of experience. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happened and it was like, oh, there is no live audience. We're going to build platforms. But then we kept incorporating things. And as we got closer to live meetings, we started bringing all of this technology live. I will stand on this that the pandemic brought hospitality technology 5 years faster than what it would have happened organically.
And I would bet you're being generous, probably even quicker than that. Just the agility. I don't know if you're a little bit more educated than me, a lot of it. I don't know if alacrity is the word, but this agility, this ability to move and adapt and transform, but utilize the tools as a new resource, as a leverage point. But it's not the end game. The end game is always the attendee providing the provision of an incredible experience and forwarding and advancing the business initiatives of the organization, the mission initiatives of the organization, and technology. In this case, artificial intelligence is another tool in the toolbox for that. And as meeting professionals begin to understand that, they're going to be able to leverage and expand and make a richer, more profound experience for their attendees. Keep a lookout for this because it's an important topic that we're going to continue to discuss in all of our podcasts. And you're going to see it being used in more and more conferences and events as a norm, as opposed to something of an outlier. But Glenna, I want to go ahead and kind of shift a little bit to an area that's near and dear to your heart, which is corporate social responsibility. It's a theme that we see that gets a lot of attention. And I want to know, from your perspective as a meeting professional, how do you incorporate these important efforts into live meetings?
The opportunity to take a group on site and to do something good for the community that you have brought them into, to advance some other organizations, whether it's a food bank, whether it's a daycare center. You are a corporation that has invested and spent the money to take the team to an offsite location. Do something good for others while you're there. And that's really as simple as it is. And it does require planning, but it doesn't require as big of a financial investment as what some companies fear it to be. They think it's going to be that it's going to break the budget. Well, we can't do that because it'll require so much extra, expenses. It really doesn't. It's something as simple as you have excess food, donate it to a food bank. Or you had a game night. Do you really want to pack all those games up and ship them back to home office where it may sit in a closet for 9 months? No. Why don't you donate those to a daycare center or to a school? It's just as simple as that, to do something good in the environment where you are.
And I see it all the time, from guitars being made for veterans. I just saw that one recently in Nashville, and it just was like, wow, what a great idea. You can they bring in the body and the neck, and you connect it, and they string it, and you sign it, and it's a gift to a veteran who's a musician or an aspiring guitarist. There's just that's just one of an infinite amount of possibilities. One area where I know it's a strength and it's not necessarily the sexiest part of being a meeting professional, but talk about budget and how it determines an event's success.
Well, nobody wants to go over budget. I read one time years ago, and I'm sure this is still true. It's probably more true today than it was then, that a corporate event, a national sales meeting, is probably the biggest single line item event expenditure in a marketing budget. And nobody wants to feel like the money's wasted. The word boondoggle ought to be outlawed. Let's put it that way. There was a time and a place when you went, you gathered because it was what you did. Now it has to have a purpose. And the budget is more important today than it ever has been because there's been so many other expenditures that have come along in the last few years. I like to tell people, look, I alluded to it a short time ago. Look, you can use the virtual platform and you can use artificial intelligence and augmented reality to save money on the budget. And it doesn't need to be an expense item that breaks the budget. fewer people attend the meeting. And not everyone has to travel. Not everyone has to be in the hotel or consume food and beverage. It's possible through the technology of augmented reality. In fact, one of the things that we're giving people when they come on site in their goodie bag are those goggles so that they can participate, so that they can be transformed into the future or into whatever setting we have created. Same is true for those people that are logging in from their desk at home. They have the same set of goggles and they plug in and they log in. And that's a way you can use AI and AR to actually save money on the budget. But the budget's as important as it ever was. And if you know what you're doing and if you know where to save and cut costs, you can spend it someplace else that'll make a bigger difference and again, give people that wow factor.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I want to talk about keynote speakers because after all, I am your keynote curator, Glenna.
You are.
Talk about every meeting planner, every meeting professional, every conference planner, event planner comes at it in a different way. A meeting professional is always channeling the event's best interest, what the attendees' experience is. And that's no different when it comes to booking a keynote speaker. You have to inhabit what it is that is important as far as the goals, the objectives, and the mission of your event and the organization that's hosting the event for their attendees to move the ball forward in their organizations. When considering a keynote speaker, a couple of things have to come in mind, but it's different for each meeting professional. Glenna, in your mind, what are some of the key components of that?
One mistake that oftentimes clients make is that it has to be a celebrity and it has to be a household name, and that is not true. And frankly, that's where someone with your expertise comes into play. You look at the content and the agenda, you look at the message that they want the presenter to convey to the audience. There's a lot of times that you're not looking for a celebrity. You want the expert. You want somebody that connects with that audience and who evangelizes the message. If the audience connects with, they become excited about it. You want to give your audience information that they can use, get up, leave, take back to the office, put to practical use right away. And oftentimes a celebrity can't do that. And it's people like you know who's the up and coming speaker. You know who is suddenly, on the horizon, who has written the next book, who becomes the person that you're like, this guy's on fire. He's going to deliver a message that'll have people jumping out of their seats, even if he's not a household name. And oftentimes clients will say to me, hey, this guy's written a book. And look, in his book, it gives information of how to contact him. Why don't you reach out to him? Why don't you hire this guy? I always say to them, let me go through a speakers bureau. Let me go through Seth. Let me go through my normal channels, because God forbid, if I hire that guy and something happens at the last minute and he has to back out, he doesn't replace himself. If I use you and God forbid at the last minute they cancel, you say, I'm on it, Glenna. I've got somebody lined up. Let me make a couple phone calls. Don't worry. I'm all over this. So
That's right.
that's my 2 cents.
And right. And the word God forbid, unfortunately, it does happen. It has happened with such little frequency, like so infrequent, it's incredible. But when it does happen, you want that insurance policy there. I will add to your note about celebrities. When you post on social media and you're only looking for likes right away, you put up a big shiny object, a picture that draws attention, a photo with a celebrity or something really cool and unique, but there's not a lot of meat on the bone after. So you get a big surge of likes and then the engagement just drops off. The fallacy is that if you hire a celebrity or a keynote speaker with a lot of fame or a lot of notoriety, the likelihood of them providing something impactful that people are going to be able to go back to their workplace or their home and utilize right away and have an immediate impact that lasts a long time is less. It's just the nature of the beast. Many event hosts think that it's going to help attendance. It's going to help the marketing of the event. And that might be the case, but it's very short-lived. What happens is if you have this event and you have a long view, your event will have a reputation of a lot of sizzle with no meat. But if you over time have a great speaker, a great keynote speaker that's aligned with the message more than even evangelizing, that inhabits and incorporates and embodies your organization's goals and objectives and can move the ball forward for you just by virtue of what their story is, what their book is about right now, it makes all the difference. And there you have a longer view. You'll get likes using the social media metaphor, but you'll have a deeper, richer, more sustained engagement. And I can't speak enough to that myself. So I get the request a lot about celebrities, Glenna. So you're kind of preaching to the preacher, if you will. How do you stay on top of industry trends?
I read every morning. I have a
Okay.
subscription to Smart Meetings Magazine as well as Meetings Net. There is something almost every single morning that pops into my inbox about 5:30. This morning, there was an article in, I believe it was in Meetings Net. It was a new technology called Thrust of how to use sustainability ideas and to drive the data so that you can track how sustainable you're being. This is new technology. I know nothing about it, but I read the story and I'll check it out later. IMEX. I try every year as much as possible to schedule myself to be at IMEX. Some years it's not possible. There's other hosted buyer events, smaller events that companies will, North Star meetings, they usually host a couple of good ones. It takes time, some expense. You're away from the office, you're away from home, but it is well worth it. It is that old adage, what you put into it comes back to you. If you invest your time and your participation, you're going to get 3 or 4 fold what you actually put into it. LinkedIn is a treasure trove. And
Yeah.
I try to limit myself 30, 40 minutes. Otherwise, you would all of a sudden you'd find you've
Yeah.
been on LinkedIn for 5 hours. But
Yeah.
you just stay on top of the trends through those are my channels of how I stay on top of what's coming and what's popular.
Yeah, those are great avenues, and I know from interacting with your social and just our interactions, you're asking questions about speakers and what's your angle and this and that. That you make the investment, you make the time, and it's professional development. It's not just to know about the new bright shiny object. It's really why doesn't it make sense? And you've always been a great champion of that. Well, Glenna, let's move into, like I said, a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more whimsical part of the podcast. It's at the end here. We call it 20 questions. I'm going to ask the question, and in kind of word association, you just give me the shortest, tightest, quickest answer that comes to mind, and we're just going to move on to the next one. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yes.
Who's been one of the most memorable keynote speakers at your events?
Rocky Blyer,
What's one of your favorite books?
Little Women,
As an aspiring author, what would the name of your first book be?
Waterloo,
What are 3 must-have items when you travel?
comfortable shoes, earphones, and a book.
What swag do guests most like at events?
Earpods.
I love the story of how your company got its name. When's the last time you flew a kite?
That would have probably been around 1998.
What's your favorite type of event to plan?
Incentives.
What's one prediction that you have for the industry this year?
Live meetings are going to come back bigger than ever.
What's the first piece of advice that comes to mind for someone wanting to get into the industry?
Be humble
What's your favorite way to unwind after an event?
with my corgis. I have 2 corgi dogs.
Hollywood's planning a movie about your life as an event planner. Who's playing you?
Meryl Streep.
You know what? As I was reading that question, I swear, that's what came into my mind. How do you keep your cool when stress levels rise at events?
Planning. I've planned this thing 5 different ways. If it's not plan A, it's B. If it's not B, it's C.
Yeah.
So planning.
Yeah, I know that about you. If you had a warning label, what would yours say?
Natural redhead.
That's a good point of departure. Well, Glenna, we're gonna, I think we left a little bit on the table, kind of that's by design, so
Mhm.
that we can revisit this and get a little historical past going and revisit in at another time when trends have shifted and the landscape is new and we have a new way of looking at things. I can't thank you enough for your time, for just being so generous with your preparation, your interest, and your willingness to come and share not only with the keynote curators, but really our community at large. So just thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. This has been a lot of fun. This
Visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com. There you'll find dozens of videos of speakers that are a perfect fit for your event. If you'd like to reach out directly, please click on the link below in the description. My name is Seth Dechtman, and you've been watching Curated Insights.